Hey, it's Bill from the Bill Simmons podcast. FIFA World Cup 26 fans, listen up. As the official beer sponsor of the FIFA World Cup 26, Michelob Ultra is giving away $1 million worth of FIFA World Cup 26 tickets and prizes. Enter now at michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra FIFA World Cup 26 superior access. No purchase necessary. Open U.S. residents 21 plus begins on December 1st, 2025. Ends on July 31st, 2026. Multiple entry periods. Visit www.michelobultra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26 for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
This summer, serve up the Cookout Classics, Oscar Mayer hot dogs and Heinz mustard. Grill up a dog, add classic yellow mustard, or loaded Chicago style. We all know it's not a cookout without Oscar Mayer and Heinz.
Okay, I know that I've said on previous episode or a previous episode that me and my relationship with my mic has taken an interesting turn since I've been traveling quite a bit, which works in your favor if you're now listening to this, because I can do one big brain dump of all of the things that has gone on in the WTA Tour since the beginning of the year up until now, where we stand with the clay court swing in full effect in Europe. But I feel like you guys wouldn't enjoy just a massive brain dump. Maybe you would, I don't know, of just me and my thoughts. So I had to bring some people back onto the show who helped me kind of filter my thoughts when I ramble and help me just divulge through this large thing called tennis, in particular women's tennis today. So I have some really high performing guests back on the show today because people liked our chat last time. Firstly, we have Miss Caitlin Thompson, founder of Racket, which is a media company, an award-winning print magazine that is The Racket, that celebrates the art, ideas, style, and culture surrounding tennis. And also, Caitlin is the co-host of the Renee Stubbs Tennis Podcast, which is a great listen if you haven't heard it yet. And I'm going to add her up right now so we can get this chat started.
How's it going? Thanks for having me back.
I'm happy to have you back. How are things going on your end?
Great. I just recorded an episode of our Renee Stubbs Tennis Podcast today, and I have a feeling, it's hard to argue with Renee because she's so annoying. So I feel like we'll probably have an ability to air out some topics together. I'm very excited to join you to talk about women's tennis. It's been an exciting beginning of the year, so we got lots to chew on.
An exciting Q1. And to help us further comb through Q1, I have Miss Eliza West joining us as well. Eliza is a engaging and authentic content creator that bridges tennis culture, fashion, and on-court action together across multiple social platforms that I enjoy following. So welcome to the pod again, Eliza. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks so much for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Do you have the bandwidth? I know we said previously that you do a lot of recording on Mondays. Were you ready to dive into this one deep?
I'm so ready. I've been looking forward to it.
Okay, cool. All right. Like I said at the very beginning, I've been missing some weeks on the pod, but I haven't actually missed many weeks watching the tennis. So we're going to dive in about what's been happening from the beginning of the WTA season in January all the way up until where we are now. And before I kind of go through my brain dump of Google Notes here, let's just like look at it wide scale, like not even zoom in a little bit at all, and talk about what our most memorable WTA matches have been so far this season. Like when you think of the Women's Tour 2025 and you kind of think of a match, what match comes to your mind? Who wants to go first?
I think your pick for match of the year was actually the best one. I was scrambling to think of a match that I thought could top it. I came up with some alternatives. I know Liza did as well, because we've been watching the tennis week in, week out. But I have to say, I think pound for pound, point for point, your pick for match of the year is probably the leading contender.
I don't want to take too much credit for that, but since you rolled it out so beautifully for me, I think I will, because I do think of, when I think of women's tennis so far this year, my mind still is stuck in Australia a little bit, specifically with Madison Keys taking on Iga Swiatek, because it was a match and a result. I shouldn't say a match. It was a result that I just absolutely did not expect, because I thought I knew Madison Keys' career. I think a lot of people thought they knew Madison Keys' career. And throughout those 2 weeks in Australia, she showed us a different layer. And that layer is Grand Slam champion now, and along the way beating the world number 1 and number 2. And in that match against Iga, it just proved all the good things about her game. And I know like it feels in a way that we're far away from the Australian Open because tennis moves so quickly, but in reality, we're not that far. And I wonder if she's kind of still on the high of accomplishing that. And in the biggest way, beating the 2 biggest names, Iga and Sabalenka. But I'd give a little edge that the Iga match is a little bit better, I think. What do you think, Eliza?
I mean, it was a fantastic match, and also just like goosebumps for that entire run. And it was a special run because it made everybody happy. I don't think we saw as many players congratulate a Grand Slam winner in the past as we saw with Maddie, and just people kind of coming up and just sharing that story of what you said, thinking that Maddie wasn't going to get a Grand Slam title, but she still had a great career. And I think it kind of took everybody by surprise in such a pleasant way. I mean, she was obviously playing great tennis in the run-ups to the Aussie Open, but I don't think there were many of us who predicted her to be a Grand Slam champion at this stage. And I think that's what makes that match even more special, seeing her overcome that. And I also thought there was this like unique element and twist, of course, with her coach, who's her husband, and that on-court coaching, the sideline coaching that the AO introduced this year, and how much that really seemed to help her specifically, and whether that might creep into the US Open or any of the other Grand Slams. I know it might be tricky at Wimbledon with where the coaches' boxes are and stuff like that, but it seemed to really be an addition that benefited Maddie. And I wondered what you guys thought of that influence, and of course her husband being in the coaching box.
I forgot all about that little coaching pod. This is why we have you on the show, because I completely forgot that element of it. And it did add a little piece of intrigue into the whole Madison Keys journey and kind of everybody's journey at Australia, but specifically that match with Iga. I remember some very outright coaching moments between Madison Keys and her coach/husband. And I don't know if I'd ever seen Madison Keys be poured into in that way, and the result lead to such a big win and going on to lead the trophy. So yeah, I'm glad you made me think about that, because I completely forgot that we're in this age of a coaching pod, if that makes any sense. Yeah. And that's what it was at the AO. Caitlin, what do you remember about that AO run for Madison Keys? Or feel free to drop any other matches that come to mind.
I mean, the Sabalenka final was amazing. I also thought that was a match that she probably wouldn't win, just like the Iga match. It was a different version of Maddie Keys that we've seen in a long, long time. Although to hear Renee tell it, who is always on the right side of these things, even if it happened in real time or not, she's always like, oh, I called that because 2 weeks before I saw her play great in the run-up tournament, which might or might not be true. But for me, it was the Iga Swiatek match. Maddie Keys gets it to a third set. Iga is doing an extended bathroom break, an extended stretch at the baseline, an extended, vocal warm-up,
shadow swings,
the whole thing. And I was just like, oh, here we go. And, Madison Keys of more, recent years is somebody who gets in her own head. She's somebody who, has some moments of anxiety, and then they kind of take over the match. In this moment, Madison Keys patiently, not even looking at her box, patiently waits for the shenanigans to be done, steps up to the line, fires an ace up the tee. And I was like, okay, this is a different Maddie Keys. This is somebody who is totally comfortable in this moment, totally embracing the pressure of the moment, but feeling like herself and that she can dictate points. And to me, it kind of doesn't matter what Maddie Keys does for the rest of her career if she has that one Grand Slam. She's obviously been to another Slam final, the one she lost to Sloane Stephens many years ago at the US Open. She's made a ton of semis. She's just been a fantastic athlete, but somebody I think a lot of us, which to Liza's point about why she got all those congratulations, was somebody that, I think a lot of us had written off as being capable. And I think what was amazing about that match is not only the narrative and the fact that here was somebody who we've been rooting for the better part of 20 years, who'd finally achieved their dream, but she'd seemed to do it in such a refreshingly self-confident and self-possessed way. The points were actually, just from a quality standpoint, the highest quality of rally, length, variety. Iga played a fantastic match, in fact. She didn't play poorly at all. And I think for me, what I like the most are matches where both players are elevating each other and we have just the highest possible quality of tennis. And that's truly what we saw. And for me, that kind of made it far and away, along with the narrative, just so much better than any other match we saw this year, even though, we've managed to pick a few other ones. So I know that there's a few other that stood out in mind. But for me, yeah, I think you nailed it. The Iga Maddie semi in Melbourne was just so good. It's hard to imagine a match even that good for several years on the WTA tour. I'm thinking maybe Sabalenka, Rybakina, Australian Open final from a couple of years ago, but just great quality, great outcome, and fantastic narrative.
I know you mentioned that we picked a couple other ones. I'm curious. I'm going to throw it back to Liza here. Were there any other matches outside of that AO that have happened in this kind of Q1 area that kind of fall under Caitlin's high regard of high quality and high stakes?
I can think of two that I would throw into the mix. Number one maybe has some recency bias, but I really enjoyed the match between Alex Fiala and Jessica Pegula semifinal in Miami. I thought that Fiala just really rose to the occasion, played some great tennis. I thought Jessie also played great tennis that whole week, really powerful and strong from the baseline. And I think it's really hard when you face a young up-and-coming player who's kind of hard to scout and know what you're expecting, someone who's gotten a few big wins and is feeling super confident and kind of has nothing to lose. And it's really stressful. So to see her kind of be in that situation where it's going tight in a third set and she has to figure out those problems, I really enjoyed that match. And then I'm a big Ostapenko fan, and I can't believe we've had two more editions of the Swiatek Ostapenko battles. They always make me laugh. And it's just one of those puzzling head-to-heads of I don't think I've seen a world number, one or two lose this many matches against someone who's so much lower ranked consistently over the years. And it's just the way that Ostapenko gets up for it too. I spent a little bit of time with her at Indian Wells and I asked her about it and she was like, I don't know, I just have a different level of being fired up and wanting to win this match more than against anybody else. So clearly they're not besties. And I think that it just brings out some jaw-dropping tennis from Ostapenko's side that is just so fun to watch. So I'll throw that one in the mix too.
Isn't it interesting that Ostapenko is the same woman who lost to Alex Fiala and then now is the champion of Stuttgart, defeating Iga and Sabalenka in the final? And all of that happened in a span of a month?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Ostapenko's tennis. I mean, we haven't seen her have loads of consistent runs since RG, but we know that she can be a giant killer. So we see her in draws playing big names, and you always give her a shot when it's her day. But you look at Stuttgart, and she's not a title contender, but we know well that she can play big tennis, and it's just a matter of how many matches back to back she can put together. And I get the sense that she still thinks very highly of herself, still thinks she could be a Grand Slam contender, still thinks she's up there with the best. And I sometimes think you can convince yourself to play at a level that maybe your ranking doesn't reflect when you hit these bigger tournaments and take people by surprise. So for me, it's Ostapenko is always that dangerous dark horse in the draw that could either lose first round to someone who you've never heard of or can go and win the title or take out the world number one on the way. And it's just, it never fails to entertain, in my opinion.
Whether she loses big or wins big, you remember what Ostapenko matches look like and feel like if you watch them. Yeah. Caitlin, you don't think that she's going to be on the precipice of doing something special like she did at RG again, do you? Because I don't feel like Ostapenko works that way. She just is too out there.
It's hard to imagine, and one of the things that we tend to forget about the RG run is, she strung a whole bunch of matches together. So anybody who wins 7 matches in a row gets the right to call themselves a Grand Slam champion, at one of these 4 tournaments. On the other hand, she was sort of gifted a final by Simona Halep, who just totally panicked and freaked out. One thing that we have to factor in, and this is true of a lot of Grand Slam finals, Marketa Vondrousova, great player. Does she win a Wimbledon if Ons Jabeur has half of a, functioning brain because she's not overwhelmed by the moment and forgets to wear the right match outfit? Does Coco Gauff have a Grand Slam if Aryna Sabalenka a couple years ago in New York doesn't like totally capitulate to the crowd and the fact that every single person in Arthur was screaming against her and nerves took over? I don't know. Not to take anything away from Marketa Vondrousova or Simona Halep or certainly Coco Gauff, who everybody loves, including me. But I think nerves and some of this stuff is a little chancy and luck. The fact that she only has one Grand Slam to me indicates that, yeah, she's streaky, and usually that doesn't come together because 7 matches in a row just is outside of her depth. Certainly now, when she's a less fit, less movement-oriented player, still taking giant swings and as fearless as ever. One of the jokes I raised on the podcast today with Renee was, do we think that Jelena Ostapenko is delusional about her dancing the way that she's sort of delusional about her tennis in a good way? And, does she think she's the world's greatest ballroom dancer? And we sort of had to conclude yes, probably. She probably does.
Was she on the celebrity version of Latvian Dancing with Celebrities or something? Or should she be?
Yes, if they have one, she should be on it. But she's a very sort of well-regarded and certainly very ostentatious ballroom dancer at home in Riga, Latvia. So, I think part of it is just she's completely, sort of delulu in a good way, and that is helpful. But until when you meet a player who's better, I have to imagine that this run is not going to turn into anything. But beating Iga and Aryna in 2 matches in a row is not nothing. And if there's anything I personally love, and also that the WTA seems to have a pretty high tolerance for, it's chaos. So chaos is always a factor. You can't put it away.
Can I pose the question of do you think Swiatek can overcome Ostapenko? How does she turn around this head-to-head? Will it?
I hope not. I hope she never does. I hope it's 40-0.
Honestly, I would love that. I would love that.
I just love it. I would love it if Jelena Ostapenko just retires after her 30th victory in a row over Iga Swiatek. It was you know what? Maybe I lost to everybody else, but I never lost to you.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in their relationship and the dynamics that led to why, like you were saying earlier, Liza, why Ostapenko gets up for that match. I would love to know what pinpointed the significant rise in Ostapenko's just alertness when she gets to a tennis court, when she knows that Iga Swiatek is not only across the court, but in the part of the draw, because she does that thing too. It's never I shouldn't say never, because I don't know this off the top of my head, but it's hardly a round 1 matchup. It's in the tournament. So it's Ostapenko knows that she's going through the gears to be able to get to that matchup, and then she just lets it all flow. And before you know it, we're looking at the head-to-head we have now.
And guess what? They're on the same side of the draw in Madrid, so it could happen again.
I wonder how Iga's sleeping.
I think it has a lot to do with just the way Iga's personality is so the opposite of Jelena's, and the fact that Iga's little mannerisms and things that she's doing on the court. I don't think it's intentionally distracting opponents, but I think Jelena sees that and just is all over it. He's I'm not taking your crap. I'm not taking these weird shadow swinging things and bathroom breaks and whatever other tactics that Iga intentionally or not intentionally likes to throw out. I think that just turns Ostapenko on and makes her excited. And I just think it's all of these little irritating things that makes her rise to the occasion. If you were to ask her really what it is, and I said to him why do you keep getting the win? And she just is I know how to play her. I know how to get under her skin and annoy her, and it just seems to work for me. And I think whenever you play somebody with that level of confidence and you have that many matches that you've won, it becomes extremely mental at that point. And I think Swiatek will struggle to overcome that matchup for sure.
Do you think that we have an Iga Swiatek will struggle era happening right now? Because we've talked about Ostapenko and Iga's issues with her, but this season it hasn't just been Ostapenko. And I kind of wrote this down in my notes here. Iga is in the midst of for her standards, an almost slump. And I'm wondering where you guys kind of face this now very significant part of the season that we're moving into, the European clay court swing, where she's been so dominant for the past 4 or 5 years, and she doesn't have a title, let alone a final to her name since last year's Roland Garros. So does saying that just mean that she's in a slump, or do you kind of look at who she's lost to factor in where in the world Iga Swiatek is in her career as we speak?
I think about it in terms of season, part of the season, certainly. And I also think about it in terms of technique. I think one of the best things about tennis is each of these players, and this is true certainly more than it's ever been true on both tours, the players know that unless they keep their edge, unless they continually add tools, unless they add variety, unless they're activating every part, unless they're addressing weaknesses, you're going to get lapped, especially when you've got Mira Andreevas and Alex Ielas. And just, there's no shortage of people coming in from the pipeline to challenge the status quo. So if you want to stay at the top of your game, you have to be improving, much less not, stagnating or moving backwards. And I think when I look at what Iga has done in terms of the off-court choices, I don't know that Wim Fissette is a particularly good matchup for her in terms of coach. I mean, he's very famously a nice guy. He's a positive guy. Obviously, he's worked with a ton of Grand Slam champions, not taking anything away from him. That said, I don't know that he's actually the loudest voice in her box. I think she's got a lot of folks around who are bringing various things. Maybe some of those things are ripe for some change, and you can read into however you'd like to. I also think, there are persistently pretty serious issues with her serve and her forehand. If she pays the price less on a slower clay court, she hasn't yet played this year on a slow clay court. She didn't play Charleston, which is a little faster. Stuttgart is indoors, it's faster. Madrid is at elevation, it's faster. When the clay slows down a little bit in the Rome and Paris part of this clay court season, it stands to reason that we'll get a better look at the Iga that is the most comfortable. But it does kind of make folks worried. I mean, Iga won the Sunshine Double a couple of years ago on hard. She has won the Australian Open in the past. She has, done quite well. Has she won the Australian Open in the past?
She won the U.S. Open.
She definitely won the U.S. Open. She made a good run, after the retirement of Ash Barty in Australia. This typically isn't her very, very best part of the year, but it's certainly not as bad as it has been this season so far. So for me, I'm a little bit concerned that she hasn't done much to improve, and I'm not sure the voices around her are helping her do that. I was hoping we'd see a little bit more assertiveness from Wim, just in terms of what Liza was talking about. The ticks, the kind of, I don't know if you want to call them
the
gamesmanship.
Stuff that she carries to the court. It's a lot.
The stuff that it comes with the court. And I think more than anything else, I don't personally like it because it reminds me of juniors, but I think more than anything else, it's an indication, it's kind of a tell to your opponent that you're anxious, that you're high strung. I don't know that it's the strength that maybe she thinks it is, or that it, to me, I think it's telegraphing anxiety. And I don't know, that she should or wants to continue playing that way, because I think she kind of needs to evolve a little bit. And so I'd love to see her do that. Not totally in the panic mode yet until the slower clay courts are upon us. But unless she has a great, great Rome, I'm thinking maybe she doesn't defend at the French Open.
Which is hard to do. She's going for her 4th in a row.
Sure.
Yeah. Eliza, feel free to chip in.
She's been so far away the favorite in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Not even, other clay courters, Coco Gauff or Alina Svitolina last year. Mukova, was not really in that match. I mean, Iga's so far ahead of everyone else on that Roland Garros Terre Battue. I don't know that this year, unless something drastically changes, she's got the edge.
I would agree with everything you've said. I'd add the little piece of the context of the doping ban and how she has reflected on that negatively impacting her psyche and losing the world number 1 spot. And I think anytime you become obsessed with the ranking and the world number 1 kind of slot, and now putting that pressure on yourself of every tournament that goes by that you don't win, you're further and further away from regaining that. And by her having that number 1 spot, as you say, for a long period of time where she largely went unchallenged, and now that feels actually like a mountain to climb and it's kind of slipping away from her, that she seems to have internalized that pressure and it's reflecting in her tennis and just like her attitude towards problem solving and coming out of difficult situations. I think the post that she made on socials after the whole Indian Wells ball kid situation was also kind of revealing of how she's taking on a lot of the criticism that she sees online, that she feels like she can't kind of get the right balance between being like her kind of shy self and being a bit more emotional on the court. And there doesn't seem to kind of be like a happy medium for her when she's experiencing frustration or she is in a losing position, that she feels like she can kind of let that out and not be under the cosh of negativity online. I think she's paying a lot of attention to things that are probably quite a big distraction for her and is sort of snowballing into this like negative aura that can make her feel like, yeah, crap, I haven't made a final since last year and I haven't got a title to my name and clay seems to be my best surface. And then all of these things are kind of adding up and you start to think, okay, now clay all of a sudden has become so pressurized when in the past it was the surface that she looked forward to the most and probably thought, like, I'm going to go into this crushing it. And we already saw last year in Madrid how close that was with Sabalenka in the final, which was one of the best matches of the year. And I'm sure those things get into her mind. She sees Ostapenko's in the draw. Like there's a lot of kind of things that might get the wheels turning of like, can I do this again? And yeah, she just seems to be in a mentally quite a negative spot. And I would agree that I'm not sure Wim Fissette was quite the right like pick for her personality wise. And I'm also not sure of kind of, the relationship with the other members in her coaching box and like how healthy that seems to be. I know there's been like more and more kind of like underground grumbling with her relationship with the psychologist and like, is that gone beyond professional to something more personal, and how does that impact her possibly or not at all? I don't know. But of course, these are all speculations. But I think there's just a lot going on off court that seems to be filtering into her game.
The Iga Swiatek era is in jeopardy, I would say. It's in a state of flux. Sorry, Iga-nators, don't come and swarm the comments. Actually, you should.
They're going to.
Let us know what you think.
It's going to happen. Yeah.
Let us know what you think. Somebody else that I wanted to switch over to, because Caitlin, you mentioned her name and you also mentioned serves and forehands. And I think with those three prongs, you can think of who I'm thinking of. And that is Miss Coco Gauff, who also seems to be in a state of flux because she has gone through Australia, the Sunshine Double, and now Stuttgart with some straight set losses to people who you think she should not be losing to, and let alone in straight sets. I'm talking about Magdalena in Miami, Belinda Bencic in Indian Wells, and then we're at Stuttgart, she loses to Jasmine Paolini. And there's some other losses there that make me question what she has going on, what her distractors are in her box, and where her game is developing, especially in regards to the serve and the forehand, because it keeps going back to that. So we're looking at a swing that has been advantageous for her because she's been to the quarterfinals or better at Roland Garros seemingly every time she's played it almost. But it doesn't seem like that's a given going into where we are in the season right now. So I'm interested what you guys' takes are of where Miss Coco Gauff is at the moment.
Everything that I think we discussed, minus the doping ban and the Indian Wells.
Thank God. Can you imagine?
Thank God, totally. Minus the nearly hitting a ball boy in Indian Wells and the doping ban kind of applies to Coco from the Iga camp, which is, I'm not sure how helpful her coaching team is. I don't know what the Muratoglu folks have been working with her on. She was obviously having great results with, people maybe say Brad Gilbert, but I actually give more credit to Per Riba, who was really sort of reorienting the way she moved, which is already exceptional, as is Iga's movement, exceptional. But really on that forehand helped her, I think, get sort of out from under it so that she could be a little bit more aggressive. I have said this since Iga. I've said it since I watched Coco and Iga play each other in the Roland Garros Juniors in 2019 or something. Which was, they're both great. They're both fantastic movers. They both clearly love clay. They both have pretty serious technical deficiencies, and I would love to see especially in the case of Coco Gauff, just taking a few months off and fixing it. She doesn't have any points to defend. She's sort of out of the center, the white hot center of expectations and pressure, unlike Iga, which I think, to Liza's point, is certainly weighing on Iga's psyche and adding to a lot of the stressor of not retaining the number one ranking. Coco doesn't have that pressure. Coco, we know off court, is such a gem and so beloved and has a great family around her. I think just making some changes, like who's in my box? What are my strokes looking like? How can I readjust and reorient? Maybe just skip, a chunk of this season, maybe after the clay season, if it doesn't, regardless of how it goes, especially if it doesn't go well, though, let's just table grass, come back at the US Open, see what kind of, dent she can make in the hard court swing in the US and North America. And if it doesn't come to fruition, maybe shut down the season right after the American swing and go back to the drawing board a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it. And she's also 20 years old. She's so unbelievably young that, to me, making a few investments, and this has been an issue, I think, for her game since I watched her as a kid. There's some technical shortcomings that she's been able to make up for because she's such a great mover, because she's such a great athlete. And more importantly than anything else, she's such a great competitor. Mm-hmm. I think those things tend to catch up with you, especially when week in, week out, there are women showing up on this tour without a flaw to their technical game. And, I think you look at somebody like Mira Andreeva, who's won not only her first title this year in Dubai, but also a massive tournament title in Indian Wells. Between those two, beating just about everybody who matters on the women's tour. Mm-hmm. She's not going anywhere. She's technically perfect. She has all the tools, and she's not, hitting 15 double faults a match, right? Whereas Coco is. Yeah. So for me, it's just let's take a hard look at what the technical aspect of her game is looking like, especially if clay doesn't materialize the way that it kind of needs to for her, for game and for confidence. And then let's call an audible and just reorient some things. There's no harm in doing it, and I don't think that there will be any price to pay other than her coming back hopefully refreshed with a few new tricks up her sleeve.
I think there is a small price to pay. And I feel like for a lot of players, because while you were saying that, you were making excellent points, I was thinking, how would it actually look and how would Coco Gauff feel if she got off of the constantly rotating race that is chasing points and playing tournaments to fix something as crucial as the serve and forehand technical issues that come with that? How would she feel? Would she feel like she's giving an advantage to her opponents? Would she feel like she's letting them in and letting them know that things need to be changed drastically? And would that affect the way they play her? Those were all the things that were going through my mind, because I wonder how it would look if Coco Gauff didn't play Wimbledon in a grass court swing or something of that nature, and how it would actually affect her game. Because there's a thought process that it would. If she takes a lovely center sabbatical, as we're going to coin that now.
Maybe she should just sort of get into some controversy on purpose or accidentally. She'd be like, I used a spray. I don't know. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to miss a couple months. That would be cool. And,
oh, gosh.
Great advice. She should totally listen to me.
Remember what Serena said in the Time magazine? Oh, my gosh. I think it applies to Coco, because if she ever had any inkling, right, I can just imagine how terrible it would be for her. But I'm just thinking, because it's not a bad idea. I just don't know how it would actually logistically go with the demands that is constantly playing tennis,
Just quickly on that point, yes, I take your point, and you're probably right. Certainly, if she got caught with anything inadvertently or on purpose, you're right. The double standard would be harsh and unforgiving. I do think that it is sort of unrealistic to think that the people playing her do not see huge holes in her game. Women have been hitting to her forehand, especially, to jam her at her body or hitting behind her for quite a while. And people know, because they attack the serve, that she's real tight on that, especially second serve when
it might not even go in the box. Yeah.
So I don't know that it's necessarily tipping a hand. I do think there's something to be said about stepping away from the tournament and kind of just losing your match fitness. And, I think there's a lot of tough decisions for her to make, but I definitely think she's going to have to start looking at some options if the season doesn't materialize, because it's been a minute since she's been in contention for tournaments, not just this year. I think she's pretty far from her peak performance. And I think, like anything else, life is long and a lot of people have long careers. I would love to see her invest a little time off court and maybe get some of the folks in her box, sorted with regards to coaching and see what she can do. It doesn't have to be 6 months. It could be, 2 months, but it's not just a reset.
Liza, how do you come down on that?
Yeah, I think I would add that she needs a little bit of a mindset shift and going back to loving the process, not loving the outcome. I think I've seen too many times the tears and the wobbly lip come out at, 2-4 down in the second set. And it's like, girl, you haven't lost yet. Why are you crying? This is just like, I think she's gone so far with this point now where she is reacting to those situations and becoming so overwhelmed that she's forgotten the part of her that can win ugly and can just grind and use her athleticism and just keep getting balls back. Like, she has to go back to the place where she remembers her serve wasn't always like this. It shouldn't have the yips in this way. And of course, I agree. There are technical issues and areas where she's breaking down, where she could certainly benefit from some training blocks strategically placed in the calendar year to help her work on those elements. But I also feel like part of this is her realizing I'm 20 years old. There's things that I can actually change and work on while I'm still playing this tournament, playing on the tour. I am okay accepting certain outcomes or lowering my expectations in the name of implementing new things or new techniques or new strategies. And I am okay with, hey, if I need to revert back to my very core elements that make me a top 10 player, that I can dig myself out of challenging situations. Of course, not every time, but I just feel like she is hitting the panic button so early these days. Mm-hmm. And it probably is not making the tennis fun for her either. And when she's in that state of mind, I just think you're always then going to double down on what is already a negative thing that you maybe have anxiety about. So yeah, I feel like it's her trying to adjust at this stage of I'm a Grand Slam champion. I'm clearly, a very, very good tennis player. I'm still very young. There's still a lot of time for me to work on things, to improve things, and start to let go a little bit of everything needs to be a final performance or trying to get to the final or trying to be world number 3 or the highest ranked American or whatever it is, and let the expectation go and try to go back to when she was breaking out onto the tour, earning her right to be a top 10 player.
Fun.
And doing the right things and enjoying the process. And that would be my advice.
I can't, just to put a cap on that, I can't emphasize how much I agree with Liza's sort of meta take here, which is that the process needs to be fun. Honestly, it really, really reminds me a lot of, I'm going to date myself, but watching Jennifer Capriati in her, the end of the first chapter of her career, where she was totally fraught. Everyone expected everything from her. She would look into the stands with bewilderment, even if, only, a match didn't even get out of her hands. Just things started not going her way. Unlucky line call. It became so much about the expectations. And I think there is such a, we think of Coco as, I think, really being mature beyond her years because she's so thoughtful and she's such a good advocate and she's, funny and possessed and all these things. But I look at her and I just think this is a kid for whom there has been unrelenting and mounting pressure, even after, and more so after she's, hit the heights of winning a slam. And I think what I would love to see, for Capriati, it took her crashing out and coming back to the sport and just loving the process and becoming just a feisty grinder, which she was not during the first chapter of her career. Coco's already a feisty grinder. So what if she got to be somebody who we saw smile on the court? That's something that I would really, really like to see. And it's something I feel like I haven't seen in quite a while. So I think the process comment that Liza said, whatever it takes to get back there, whether it's technique or mental shift or coaching changes, or maybe all three, I think that should be certainly the goal. There's a reason these players trust the process or try to, and it's because the outcome's a little bit out of her control. And I think she's tried to will it into existence because of what people around her expect. And I think that's sort of sad and unnecessary.
You guys have really made me think about my expectations for Coco and what I'm going to be looking for and not looking for really in this clay court swing. One thing I am going to be looking for is her smile again, because I agree, Caitlin, it doesn't feel like it has been a joyous occasion, which I struggle to think that it always is, to be doing such a thing as demanding and sort of monotonous as being a professional tennis player. But her smile and genuine love for the game and being feisty out there is what attracted me to watching her in the first place. So I would like to see that kind of reimagine and kind of just evolve into whatever the next stage of that looks like for her. But we've talked a bit about Coco, and we haven't even mentioned one of the most fun things about her, which is her collaborations with New Balance. I feel like we can swiftly get into the conversation of best tennis outfits, because we've talked a lot about the slumps of people. Let's talk about what they've been doing right in terms of at least wearing things on the court. Maybe their tennis is a little bit dodgy, but what they wear matters.
Doesn't matter if you play good. You can always look good. I'm going to let Liza take point on this, because this is really her area of expertise. We're just all, we're just all waiting.
We're bystanders.
We're bystanders. Liza, I have a few strong opinions, but this is really your métier. What do you think?
Feel free.
Well, what I think is great about Coco's relationship with New Balance is that she seems to be very involved in the design process, and that she's getting custom outfits that she loves and is reflective of her personality. And again, when I think of when she last smiled on court, it's like that Australian Open interview where she got the chance to like tell people about her outfit, and then she did some stuff on socials, and like I think it allows her to feel young and fresh and just like connected with people in a different way, and kind of start a conversation around tennis that doesn't have to do with her technique and everything else going on. So I think for her it's a nice distraction, and I actually thought she looked great at the AO. I mean, there's been a number of like good collections and outfits this year, and I know I always get the bias card, but I thought Wilson at Indian Wells was gorgeous with their sunset kind of gradient color schemes, and I think that they just like have really good fitting outfits. So between Wilson and New Balance, I thought those players were really well taken care of this year, and there's been room for improvement elsewhere, but we can get into the weeds of that too.
Speaking of the weeds, who are the Wilson girls? Because I think off the top of my head of Marta Kostyuk, I was able to kind of speak to her in Miami at a WTA event, and I remember vividly her talking about her relationship and collaboration with Wilson. But who else? Just so people can
Alicia
know
Parks.
And we can know.
Alicia and
Alicia Parks looks amazing. Peyton
Stearns.
Peyton Stern. Yeah, all three of them look amazing. You're right. That ombre is so flattering. It flowed beautifully on all of them. And you really get the sense that the Wilson team is like designing for women. Not to say that some of the men who they've signed in years past have looked bad. It's just, in particular, they seem to understand the way that I think female athletes want to look, which is powerful, flatter, in a way that's flattering, and also quite fashion forward. The Wilson stuff has looked really good, especially that ombre.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're designing like with women in mind. That's where the kind of collections are coming from. Their head designer is a woman, Joelle Mickelhoff, and she has involved Marta particularly so much in the process of designing the clothes. And I think that again feeds into how a player feels on the court when a brand is taking care of you so well behind the scenes and making sure that you're looking how you want to. And again, tennis is a real unique opportunity in sport that allows this collaboration with fashion and has such a long history of interesting outfits and fashion choices and fashion statements and fashion icons. And we don't have that in team sports where you're wearing a uniform. So for me, it's like this should be the sport that any big fashion brand uses as an opportunity to kind of to make a statement and do something outside of the normal kind of realm of basic athletic clothing. And so that's why, a Wilson or a New Balance is winning over Nike and Adidas at the moment, who seem to put very little effort into how things are looking.
There was a brand you may have conveniently left out of that list. Did you want to go into depth about that brand? Their initials are the opposite of off.
Well, I mean, so On is very interesting. I mean, obviously a massive billion-dollar growing company that has made such huge strides in the fitness industry and like overtaking all of the expectations we would have had from them from 5 years ago. They have signed some great athletes, some great young talent, and of course they have Iga Swiatek as well. But it's just puzzling to me that, we're 2 years now into their foray into tennis. We've only seen one style, one cut, one type of approach to color, which is gradients I thought we would get more from them. I at least thought that the basic silhouettes would be what they nail and become really good at. And I definitely thought we would have seen more variety for the women. I think, with guys like, you can have the t-shirt or you can have the tank top, like you can kind of get away with having a little less option. But the fact that we are still stuck with the front pleated skirt or the same thing as a bag dress is very disappointing.
Hey, we have neon yellow hats and sneakers. That is groundbreaking.
I like to think that they saw my video about the lollipop color scheme and that they decided it was time to change. But
maybe they're waiting on Madrid. Maybe by the time we turn on our televisions, it's going to be just absolutely jaw dropping. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we hope.
Just in time for Iga to lose to Jelena Ostapenko for the 7th time.
Literally. Yeah.
That is such an insane head to me. I can't get over it. Where should I go jumping off of insanity? Not that I'm insane, but the WTA tour can feel a little bit at times. Do we want to touch on what has been an interesting couple of months for somebody else that's highly ranked and has expectations in Elena Rybakina? I know the waters there are a little choppy. Just to kind of enter the pool there, her coach with Stefan Vukov, her relationship with her coach Stefan Vukov has been officially put on pause by the WTA. He's been on a 1-year suspension, and that has kind of been developing in the last couple of weeks and months. And I don't know if I should say as a result, but it's definitely not necessarily a coincidence. Her results have not been thriving either. I know let me put that out there, disclaimer, that she's not my favorite. I have to put that out there before anybody's like, you're coloring your opinions. She's not my favorite to watch, but I do agree that she is a great tennis player, obviously, and she should be in the landscape. But this issue with her coach and how it seems to be infiltrating a lot of other different things is a bit worrisome. And like I said, the waters are choppy there. Caitlin, Eliza, who wants to be the first to swim in those waters?
I'll dive in. I have swum in these waters before, and I have a little bit of insight into it just from some of the conversations I've had with the players on tour, some of the folks who I know who are involved in the WTA who've been behind the scenes with some of the investigations, and like a good on the WTA for looking into some of these abusive or theoretically abusive or rumored to be abusive player relationships, both with coaches but also with parents sometimes. It's not easy, especially for the women's tour, especially when a lot of these players are coached by romantic partners or parents who might have, or more financial control or certainly mental, sort of control over their players. So it's complicated. I think the real tragedy for me of this is that, I think at the heart of this, it's likely that this is a woman who is not necessarily able to advocate for herself. It doesn't make it any more fun that she's like a great player who I think the tour is lucky to have and plays well and, obviously adds a lot to the tour when she's playing well. To give her credit, obviously she started the year with Goran Ivanisevic at her side, which everyone, including myself, was so excited about. Goran is such a fun personality. Obviously, a lot of us remember when he was a player, and, coaching Novak Djokovic to good effect was, if anything, just kind of burnished his reputation. And Goran Ivanisevic decamped from Australia when it became clear that, Vukov was not going to get out of the way. And so I think for a lot of us who've kind of seen some patterns, not only specific to this case, but just how these things tend to play out. And then when you hear, years or sometimes decades later, is that, what you saw was only the tip of the iceberg and there was all this other stuff going on. I certainly hope that's not the case. I suspect it might be. And so for me, I think it's just sort of a tragedy that's unfolding in a way that I don't know how the tour can do a better job of, I'm the first to critique, especially the WTA, that I feel like has not always done, right by its marketing or right by its players, but I think they're really trying, and I think they're limited. From what I understand, her family has tried very hard to sever this relationship, and she's been unwilling to do it, maybe because she's under coercion. So there's nothing to say beyond this is a bummer, and it's super, super brutal, and I'm not sure how they could be handling it better from the governing body perspective. I think at a certain point, she's got to decide that she wants us to I think a lot of us were hoping that the Goran Ivanisevic schism would sort of cause everybody to wake up and be like, oh, this is actually a huge missed opportunity that she's not working with this great coach who's now rumored to be, stepping into Stefanos Tsitsipas's box. Well, that hasn't been confirmed, but he's obviously a great person to have on your team. And so, yeah, I think it's ugly and it's a bummer. And, if she goes deep at Wimbledon, they will have to decide whether or not, like the Australian Open did, to ban him from the grounds. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did, things I understand.
I find the whole situation very, very sad.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I don't think there's much more the WTA could have done. I know I've spoken with some coaches who are like, he is definitely not abusive, and that's just the way that things are, and none of you guys have any context. But I think the story has been going on a long time. I think Caitlin's points about their family involvement is pretty telling. If your mother is involved in trying to get rid of someone from your coaching box, I think that shows the level of concern that she has for her daughter. And it's clear they're in a romantic relationship and they are still seeing each other off the court, and she is now fallen outside of the top 10. And I don't think you're wrong, Miles, in trying to draw a line between this investigation and the ban ultimately happening and the drop off in performances. And I think the bit for me that came out of the WTA's ruling that was the most concerning was the impact of Vukov on her health and her insomnia and other kind of challenges for her to just be able to get on the tennis court. And one starts to think about how long patterns of abuse go on for and the detrimental effects it can have on your health and well-being long term, and the fact that she is not getting a break from him and some distance from him at this stage. It's really troublesome, and it's sad that there's nothing really that can be done, that she's going to have to make this decision and come to a realization in some way on her own. Because it feels like at this point, the folks in her box and also the governing body taking care of her have stepped in the ways that they can to try to help her. And I don't know what's next for her until she can sort out this terrible situation.
Yeah, it seems like there needs to be a self-evaluation moment, and a strong one. And she's still young herself, and I believe that's tough to do, especially when you are looked at as a provider for some people and expectations for brands and stuff like that. So I do feel for her, and I think there's a place in women's tennis for her at the top. I'm just not sure how she can navigate being at the top while dealing with all the things I just said. So wishing her the best, and also kudos to the WTA for making the stance and publicly saying that this is something that we're not comfortable with, and this is not for the betterment of the player that plays under our association. So I do commend them for doing that with Rybakina.
I totally do too. And I think just to put too fine a point on it, because a lot of times when we talk about this, it comes back well, it's her choice. She's an adult. What does anybody else care? The WTA and the tours writ large and all these tournaments are a workplace. If someone, and maybe that's the case in this situation, maybe it's not, but from reports we've had pretty consistently, to Liza's point, for years, and some testimony by Rybakina's family would indicate this is a person who's making the entirety of the workplace situation and the workplace sort of toxic and scary and dangerous for people. It's not just directed at one person. And I think for that reason, it is realistic and healthy for a tour to intervene and say, hey, listen, this is a place of work. We're not going to tolerate certain behavior, and we're not going to tolerate certain sort of abusive behaviors. And, whether that's directed at one person or not is less relevant. And I think that's actually a really good stand, because I think we've seen in many other sports, if a player is credibly accused of domestic violence, if somebody gets into, criminal activity, like leagues and tours and tournaments can issue bans to people. I think that is a thing that I would like to see. From what I understand, the rest of the tournaments follow suit. I thought the Australian Open was right to do that. And I think my hope is, if this happens enough, then maybe there will be that self-reflective moment. Liza said she's out of the top 10. It's unrealistic, even though she just had a pretty good, BJK Cup result over the weekend, getting Kazakhstan to the finals in Shenzhen. She's still not having the kind of season I would hope she would expect for herself, given past performance. And so, it is very hard for people who are in tough spots to, I think, leave situations like these, assuming that's what's happening. So it's not an easy feat. But I do think kudos to the tour, and I want to see more tournaments follow the AO's example, because I think that was actually a hugely positive step to sort of indicate we're not going to tolerate this.
Speaking of positive steps, I'm going to segue. We're still in the WTA field, obviously, but you mentioned about their marketing, and as the sirens are going past, I wondered if there were like internal sirens in the WTA's just infrastructure about how they needed to present themselves, which is why we have the rebrand that has been unveiled in the past couple of weeks. And I haven't talked about that at all, I believe, on my platform or any of them, because I've kind of been processing it. Unfortunately, I thought I would get to a point, well, yes, how do I put this? I thought I would get to a point where I liked it. Unfortunately, I cannot say I've gotten to that point after several weeks of sitting with the green rotating sphere tennis ball of the WTA now. I don't like it, and I say that with respect to the people that worked on it. It's not my favorite rebrand. I don't feel like it's an elevation. Where do you guys feel about visually looking at the Women's Tennis Association across digital outlets and all the things that we are consistently scrolling on our devices? Do you feel like this rebrand was an elevation? Are you reinvigorated, or how do you feel about this WTA marketing rebrand thing?
I'm extremely disappointed. And I think, I know I'm not the only one. I have spoken to many a player who is extremely upset at the level of money that has been spent on another rebrand that does not feel authentic. As you say, doesn't feel like a level up from before, and makes them feel like a cookie cutter boardroom strategy to satisfy investors and not actually capture the essence of women's tennis. And there are some insights in here in terms of who they've hired. For example, a woman who has worked in the music industry for a long time, who said she had big ambitions on changing everything about the WTA's approach to videography and photography. Well, she hired people that she has worked with, that she knows, Beyonce's photographers. And it has totally translated into the graphics and content that we're seeing, dressing up players in ways that I don't think are authentic to them. This isn't the WNBA where you have 6 foot tall plus women who are long and lanky and mostly Black women, and that's how you're going to photograph them. I think that there needs to be so much more nuance in allowing personality to shine through. I cannot get to grips with this whole, this is not a tennis court, this is a stage, and trying to make this feel like it is some sort of musical performance when it is.
We're
not.
rallying the world, Liza. That's what we're doing. We're rallying the world.
Just like generic slogans, things that, have no meaning unless they really step up to that. And I don't think that this is helping, fans connect with players in different ways, and especially connecting with players who maybe they don't know. And I think that's the whole point of, if you have a rebrand, that you try to implement strategies that allow the depth of the tour to shine, that you finally get out of the Iga Sabalenka Coco show on your socials, that you find an opportunity to open that up for players who are ranked outside of the top 50 and continuing to champion everybody who's under that WTA umbrella. And so for me, I thought there were so many ways that this rebranding fell short. And I think that they're starting to lose trust and faith in the players themselves, in the WTA's ability to really be a vehicle that can market this sport into, the bigger depths of women's sport and make it a real competitor to what are the real growing sports now of WNBA, the NWSL, and other women's major league sports. So I think they have a lot of work to do, and this wasn't a step in the right direction. It
wasn't an A+. It wasn't a knockout of the park for me. Caitlin, How do you feel when you step up to the plate of the WTA? How are you feeling?
I'm quite underwhelmed. It feels like I think that I just learned a lot from what Liza was saying in terms of the personnel involved, which makes sense given what I've seen. I just feel like sort of left like, this is pretty corporate, it's pretty high level, and it doesn't talk about the unique attributes of tennis and why it's interesting. I think one of the things, and I'm not a particularly nostalgia-driven person, but I think and I'm proud of the way that Racket has contextualized the stories around tennis, because I think we try to do a good job of making things translatable from outside of our sport. And what is amazing about the WTA, especially coming off of the 50th anniversary just 2 years ago in 2023, with new leadership, is just the rich history of this sport for women and how tennis has been a vehicle for social change. It's been a vehicle for the first LGBT athletes. It's been a vehicle for Black athletes. It's been a vehicle for women to earn something approximating equal pay with men. And it's been out in front of all these other sports. I don't resent the WNBA or the NWSL or women's hockey or any of these other sports. Now what we're seeing with all these football clubs in Europe, where they're, in some cases drawing more excitement and ratings and sponsorships than some of the men's teams. That's wonderful. It's also related to the women's tennis story. And I think for me, that is something that an entire generation of an audience, especially the audience that is new to tennis, has no idea about. And so there is a fair and justifiable critique to be made at the visual and marketing and storytelling level, which I think is totally valid. There's also, to me, just a sort of dereliction of duty about education. Like, what is so amazing about this sport is just how many personalities it has housed and how much social change and relevant world affairs and commentary about, our evolving conversation around women's sports, it has provided the platform for, and that's not to say everything needs to be like, let's remember Billie Jean King. Look, Venus Williams wrote an op-ed for the Times of London, but it just feels totally disconnected to that. Like, it's some generic airport product. And I feel like that's the part that sort of feels a little bit empty to me. It's kind of like, yes, all this is valid in terms of certain players being elevated, but also it just kind of feels, for what? So that we can look at another sort of like $1 million logo that
doesn't feel $1 million
committee in a boardroom. Like, I don't know.
I
guys.
totally agree with you.
Weird. Make it ambitious, but definitely make it something that feels resonant. And that's. I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you're totally lacking the opportunity to start the conversation on why women's tennis was here first, and again, like as you said, why it's paved the way for other sports and like social change. And I just think, why wouldn't you want to lean into some of those stories, especially if you're talking about, hey, we're at a time where we're looking at generational shift, and you want to try to attract Gen Z and younger folks into this sport to keep its longevity and its interest up. And unfortunately, folks are coming to the sport with no context or ability to connect with its history and its legacy and the people that shaped it to what it is today. And to not integrate that into a rebrand and a launch and looking at all of the faces that made the WTA what it is today in a celebratory moment of like 50 years and onwards, what do the next 50 years look like? I don't know why you would choose this commercial route that is a copy-paste strategy of what other leagues have done when you were here first. You should be doing the trailblazing and continuing to set a standard that's higher than the folks who are, coming up on underneath you and riding on your coattails. And you don't need to copy the ideas. I mean, it's just so clear to me. Every social trending video that I see on the WNBA's page is copied by the WTA 3 to 4 weeks later. And it's like, come up with your own ideas and have some confidence and faith that you guys can be creative within that space. And I think a lot of that opportunity is missed because it's folks at the top who, I hate to say it, like, don't see the value in investing in social media, don't see the point in sending younger folks to 250 tournaments and getting coverage from, you know, up and coming content creators and folks who can help amplify your message, and working with an ecosystem of people. And just knowing what they kind of have in store of how they think that's going to look in the future now as well. It's really disappointing to see the lack of kind of wanting to elevate the game and elevate all of the younger women who are in and around that as well. And just kind of trying to go for a cookie cutter approach that they think they've seen work well with other sports, and thinking that it's going to work the same here when you're dealing with people who are way more international, have totally different like backgrounds and experiences than your core kind of American sport market, which doesn't have the same kind of, like worldwide diversity that tennis offers. And it's a totally different approach.
Yeah, those other sports aren't going from Miami to Stuttgart and then from Stuttgart to Barcelona all in the span of a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's more centralized. I think that this conversation has highlighted that there are just some gaps. And I think we all knew that internally, but there are just some gaps in how women's tennis is promoted, talked about, celebrated, and just women's tennis as a whole, which is unfortunate because all three of us love women's tennis. Like, that's what we sit down and want to talk, watch, and collaborate with other people about, which is why I had you guys on the show to talk about that thing and talk about those things. But I'm happy that we exist to kind of fill in the gaps. You know, I'm happy that these kind of conversations are happening so people can realize that, one, the WTA is exciting, and two, there's so much more that it could be doing, and we're kind of helping in some way push that whole thing forward. Hopefully, I think.
Miles, I hate to say it, but I don't know how you feel, Caitlin. I think the WTA has this mindset of, la, 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 I don't hear you. We're doing a great job. You're just, criticizing just to criticize. And, like, I don't want to hear it, because there was no focus group, even amongst the players. Like, how do you launch a rebrand and not focus group
The people who are going to be like pushing that brand forward,
promoting your rebrand, right? Like, I've had players who had their images taken who asked, please don't share it because I don't like the way that I look. And that's a big problem.
I mean, I do think, the fact that we learned about it along with everybody else, as opposed to like being in the room, candidly, like, is a problem. Like, that's, I think, I don't know what it is about the leadership that feels, I don't know if it's willful, sort of trying to not listen to the zeitgeist. I don't know if it's protectiveness about some of the relationships. I don't know. I know the Australian firm who did the last rebrand, which looks a whole lot like this rebrand. I thought maybe with some of the changes in leadership, there would be, some more effort and sort of emphasis. I know obviously CVC's involvement and people on the board who are younger and a little bit, but I don't know. It is pretty baffling. Like, to me, that, it doesn't feel like a catastrophic miss. It feels almost worse, which is like something boring and safe and snoozy. Like,
what is worse than catastrophic?
I think safe, and I think boring is worse. I think if you're going to do something crazy and try to rebrand in a way that's, just absolutely bonkers, and then you want to walk it back and be like, well, that was our, in our flop era, we just tried some, I don't know. Like, I don't mind a beautiful mistake. I know how much they spend on these things. And I also know that it's a whole lot of suits who have very little engagement with audiences and very little engagement with, the fan of tomorrow. And I think when you think about what these sports need to be doing, from social media to creative campaigns to player engagement to outreach to, media and partnerships. It's the WTA has less money than others, which is why you don't want to see it be spent poorly. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at.
100%.
Okay. I'm looking at the time on our little timer here for our podcast. We've come to a spot where I feel like we should start to kind of look at the next quarter, because we're a day away, I believe, as we record this. I think it starts tomorrow, main draw for Madrid, the WTA 1000. That kind of sort of sets the scene for Roland Garros, but not really, because it's an altitude and all that good stuff. But we're going to work with what we got. Is that the trend here at the WTA, working with what we got? I don't know if you guys had any thoughts at all about that. I didn't actually write this down in my notes. I had some storylines coming into what the French Open might be, but before we get into there, any Madrid thoughts about what you have seen, either in your own independent dive down the Madrid draw?
Feliciano Lopez better have 2 equal-sized birthday cakes or it's going to pop off again. That's all I'm going to say.
It will.
I can't top that.
And don't dress the ball kids in crop tops and mini skirts, because that's also going to set me off.
I don't want to see it, but I kind of want to see you set off, Liza.
Do it again. Pop, pop, pop.
Yeah,
Let's see what happens.
Just stay on them. I don't. I foresee Madrid being something of a spectacle, and I'm just waiting to see the takes come on from tennis Twitter about what's all happening in Madrid and who might win it. So to be determined. We'll see how that goes, and stay tuned for my thoughts on Madrid as it goes through. Let's look at some of because we've kind of talked at the beginning of this podcast about like AO and like its implications, because it is a slam, and some of us are still like kind of sitting in Australia, at least mentally I am. But the French Open is a mere month away and maybe some change. It starts the day before Memorial Day here in the States. I'm thinking about like what those storylines are now, so that I'm not like scrambling at the final day or before the French Open starts. We've talked about Madison Keys. We've talked about Iga. What are some things that you guys are looking for from those players heading into the French Open? And what do you think the biggest storylines of the French Open might be?
From the women's side, I think what we talked about earlier is the closest thing to watch, which is, does the Iga of years past show up in the run-up to Roland Garros, or is it a continuation of form from earlier this year? Same with Coco Gauff. I mean, those are by and far away the best players on clay. I would love to see Muchova back in another final. I don't think, given the year she's had, that's realistic. I would love to see Aryna Sabalenka, or one of the other players that has had some decent clay results make a showing. Paula Badosa has sort of been out of the mix, but she's a former Madrid champion. I don't think she likes the ball as slow as it is in Paris. So I think for me, it's more, are the counterpunchers of yesteryear going to show up in good form for the French? And if they don't, whose tournament is it to win? It's probably not a Jessie Pegula. It's probably not a Aryna Sabalenka. It's probably not a Rybakina. So are we opening the door to another sort of like more shocking French Open result, which I think for by and large has had the sort of historically most unpredictable slam winners? Don't forget, Eva Maioli won a French Open. Anna Ivanovic won a French Open. I think Natalie Toziat, it's just sort of, it's the chaos slam in terms of results. I don't know. Maybe it's Jelena Ostapenko's year again. I doubt it. But nobody would be more excited.
Could Paolini get back to the final?
Great question. Paolini is, I wouldn't have said that I thought so before the Stuttgart tournament, candidly, because she has not had the kind of year that I think she would need to back it up. And God knows she's got a ton of points into this next swing between French and Wimbledon. But by God, she could just seize the narrative. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Wouldn't that be great?
I would
love that.
I'd
love to see
it.
Same.
And she has what we talked about earlier about Coco Gauff not necessarily smiling as much. She brings that to the court in buckets. Like, she makes you want to watch her tennis, regardless of what's happening. You're like, she just seems like a good time and just a good woman to get behind. So I like that about her.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, she has such a good attitude on the year. Like, she talks about how, last year was last year, and this year is a different season, and it's not looking at it as like defending points and I must, repeat, and it's unrealistic to think that I'm going to always repeat things. I think that mental state is what might allow her to, reach a final again or go a step further. And she's going to be a bother on the clay. I mean, especially the slow clay. I think she's going to continue to be a bother on this surface. And depending on how the draws go, and if Ostapenko is in Iga's half, then we may be looking at, an opportunity for somebody else.
Gosh, that keeps coming up and I love it. Do we think, we've talked a lot about Iga, do we see a four-peat happening? And I want to say no, because I did a little research about the women that have actually won 3 in a row, and that fourth seems to elude them. I'm talking Justine Henin, Monica Seles. I believe Chris Evert has won 4 French Opens in a row from my research last night. And there's someone else who I think is in the three-peat club, but not the 4. All of that to say, with where she is now leading into the French Open, I feel like that 4 number for her in a row, because I think she already has 4 Roland Garroses, but this 4th one in a row seems in jeopardy. And I'm just interested, as I ever have been, in where it all ends up when the clay is settled at the French Open,
I haven't seen what I needed to see to make me convinced that she's the favorite. That could all turn around, I think, certainly. But I definitely, not setting aside how hard it is, I think it's just a matter of, at a certain point, players trying a new style against you, young up-and-comers gunning for you. There's just new faces, there's new dynamics, there's new players. I would love to see some of the voices that we've seen so far on the tour who are on the younger side. Alex Ila, we've talked about, who's played a good amount on clay. She trains at the Rafa Nadal Academy. Mira Andreeva, who's won on the slower hard courts, who has all the tools, slice, net, drop shots, real variety, and a lot of mental fortitude. It feels like the most open tournament it's been in a long time. And I don't know that Iga has new tactics, new skills, or new dynamics to sort of deal with the increasing complexity of the field. She could have a great run in Rome and find her confidence again, and that would all be a moot point. But for me right now, it's looking pretty open, which is, I think, really exciting. I don't like when people repeat. I think it's boring. If it were up to me, everyone would, be a new
You get a French Open. You get a French Open.
Yeah, kind of, Why not?
I think for me, I'm still in the Iga camp. I feel like the RPMs on her forehand are most rewarded on the clay, and she hits with the most topspin out of anybody inside the top 10. And I do think that does take people by surprise, which is why she's had the success she's had on the clay in Paris. And I guess I would agree that it's not been a great season, but I haven't, other than the Ostapenko match, seen enough evidence of the fall off on the clay yet. So I'm going to stay in the Swiatek camp for now and revise my statement after Rome.
I have a statement. I think the RPMs, like Iga Swiatek's forehand on clay, have been better in this conversation. I think so. I think the RPMs in this conversation are right up there with hers on the forehand. And I'm glad that we have had a pre-French Open tussle, if you will, between the three of us, and talking about more than just the French Open. This is exactly why I wanted to have you guys on the pod again, and I thank you for taking out the time to do that. Any things that we may have skirted over that you want to talk about before we head on out of here? We're feeling good?
We left it on the court, Miles.
Yeah.
This is where we have to leave it. And this is where I want to leave you guys with the opportunity to talk about what you kind of have in the pipeline. Caitlin with the racket, Liza with all the things you have going on socials and beyond. Anything that you guys want to plug that you're working on in the future or soon to come?
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks so much for having us. Obviously, we'll have another print issue out right before the US Open. Our issue number 26, starring Taylor Fritz, is out everywhere now. We're going to head over to the EU and possibly London for some events. So check out the Racket newsletter. You can sign up on our website for some exclusive invites. Maybe we'll run into our good friend Liza out there as we did last year. Hopefully, Miles, you'll be out there for the continental swing of the tennis season. But stay tuned. We should have an exciting summer ahead of us, I hope.
Fingers crossed for sure.
Well, I'll be in Rome. So if any fans are going to be in Rome, I would love to find you, and then possibly Paris as well. And then other than that, you can follow me on socials. It's Eliza's Wild, and keep responding to comments on the videos. I want to hear what you guys think. It always makes my day to read what people write to me. So yeah, that's the best place to find me, and you'll find all of my projects there.
Love that. Love this conversation. Love that you guys have been open about coming back on Tuned in Tennis. And I think we got some good conversation out of it. Don't you agree?
I had fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miles.
Of course. You guys stay tuned for the next episode. Make sure to follow Tuned in Tennis across socials. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Take care.
Big color, bigger savings. Sherwin-Williams Super Sale is here. Get 40% off paints and stains June 5th through the 11th with prices starting at $30.89. Whether you're refreshing your interior or exterior, we've got the colors to bring your vision to life. And with delivery, getting everything to your door is easier than ever. Shop online to have it delivered or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for deliveries. Delivery available on qualifying orders.